So here we are given expressions and we're going to simplify it and write it in the standard form of a complex number, which is a plus bi. So let's look at the first one. 5 radical negative 4 is 5 radical negative 1 times 4. We can write the radical negative 9 as negative 1 times 9. So remember that by the rule of exponents, if we have radical AB, that's equal to radical A times radical B. And that works for multiplication and division. So radical A over B is radical A over radical B. So we simplify this expression to get 5 radical negative 1 radical 4 minus 2 radical negative 1 radical 9. Now remember that radical negative 1 is defined by the imaginary number I. So that is 5 times I times radical 4 is 2 minus 2 times I. So radical negative 1 is I. Radical 9 is 3. So we simplify this to get 5 times 2 is 10i minus 3 times 2 is 6i. So that is 10i minus 6i is 4i. So the standard form is obviously 0 plus 4i, but your answer can be written as 4i. Now the next one, 5 radical negative 8 is 5 radical negative 1 times 8 plus 3 radical negative 1 times 18. So that's equal to 5 radical negative 1 radical 8 by the same rule that we discussed here, plus 3 radical negative 1 radical 18. Now radical 8 is not a perfect square. So let's first write radical negative 1 as I. Radical negative 8 is not a perfect square, but we can see a square sitting in there. So 4 is a perfect square, so that I write it as 4 times 2 plus 3 radical negative 1 radical, I should have changed that to I, let's just change it to I, times, and 18 is not a perfect square, but I can write it as 9 times 2. 9 is a perfect square. So now simplifying it further, I have 5 times I. Now radical 4 times 2 is radical 4 times radical 2 using the same rule here, plus 3 times I radical 9 times radical 2. So that's equal to 5 times I. Radical 4 is 2. Radical 2 remains as radical 2. 3i times 3 radical 2. So this is equal to, now we simplify this. So 5 times 2 is 10 radical 2 with an I multiplied to it. We're just rearranging the terms and writing it in the standard form. So 3 times 3 is 9 radical 2, that's the number, and then we have I. So we could write it as 10 plus 9 radical 2i, so that's 19 radical 2i, and that's the final answer.